We should give
Order.
them.
John Hayes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this bill tonight. And I do so in support of the bill unequivocally, reflecting on the comments from colleagues across the House and the importance that Jim Sutton and Jim Anderton played in initiating this bill. But I'd like to inform the House that in 2004, when these people had these very original ideas, it was the year that this sort of system was introduced in the European Union. They have a system called TRACES, the Trace, Control and Export System, which tracks movements of livestock both within the EU and from third countries into the EU. It's also worth reflecting that around this time the Australians had their own system. It's called the National Livestock Identification System. It traces animals from birth to slaughter. It improves, the Australians do this because, as some members have already mentioned tonight, having a system like this improves access for Australian produce to export markets and also contributes to food security. The Americans also have a system, and when I reflect on Damien O'Connor's list of countries that have systems like Argentina, Mexico, Korea that he mentioned, all of those countries export into America. So if you want to do that, you've really got to abide by American rules, which cover cattle, poultry, horses, donkeys, sheep, goats and pigs, and all other animals. It is worth reflecting that we're just talking about beef and deer at this point, but other countries manage to include all of their productive animals except household pets. Of course, in 2004, Jim Anderton was the Minister of Agriculture that don't worry about the productive part of the economy, let's microchip dogs. And that caused a furore, at least in my electorate. Now, the goal in the American system is to be able to trace within 48 hours of identifying an animal which is unwell, where that animal's been, how it's moved, and therefore contribute to disease control. So I support this bill because it's critical for our export markets, and being critical to our export markets, it's going to give us high returns. So I would say to my colleague in the New Zealand First Party who was standing to oppose this bill and said, well, we should be relating to market forces, I can tell you that this system operates among many farmers in the Wairarapa in my electorate, and particularly for exporting into the American market. Those farmers that supply traceable meat right back into an individual farm to the American market get a high premium for doing so. So the returns are already there for the innovative and progressive farmers that have introduced this system without legislation. I think that it's really important that we encourage farmers to engage with traceability, because if you're going to get a higher price for your product, you're going to get a better return at your farm gate. If you do that, then you're going to contribute to growing the economy, and that is a clear priority of this government. We want to grow this economy, we want the boat to go faster, and we want that because we want a better standard of living for everybody in this country. We will all benefit from that outcome. Mr. Speaker, it's worth keeping in mind that this scheme will become compulsory for all farmers for their beef animals, myself included, on the 1st of July of this year, and next year, I think, on 1st of March 2013 for deer. I think it's probably inevitable that within the next few years we will see the scheme being extended to other animals in this country, particularly those that we need to push off into export markets. Interesting for a second too to just recall the comments of my colleague in the Labour Party, Ruth Dyson, talking about apple traceability. She's absolutely right in what she's talking about, but I've begun to get complaints from apple farmers in my electorate who are complaining about the high cost of meeting biosecurity requirements in exporting products into the Australian market. Basically, I'm told it costs you $200 to get an 18-kilogram carton of apples through into the Australian market. That's the cost of meeting the biosecurity system. We don't want to get into that situation with beef and sheep in our meat exports, and I think that this bill and the system that is being implemented is really going to be very cost efficient for livestock animals. It's going to increase returns for export markets. That will benefit all New Zealanders, and I have no hesitation in supporting the bill. Thank you.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to rise to take